Hello. So, the sweater that you see me wearing right now is actually my first ever completed knitting project. I just finished it a few days ago. I've been wearing it almost nonstop, and I spent around the last 5 weeks or so working on it. And throughout the process, there was a lot of time spent with my thoughts. I think part of the reason why I even picked up knitting again in the first place was because I was craving more slowness, and that's what knitting has given me. And throughout that process of slowness, there have been many thoughts, many aha moments, many questions, lots of philosophizing. And if you ask anybody that's seen me in the last month and a half, I've probably brought up knitting to them and how much it's been kind of transforming my mind and my relationship to making. And yeah, I've just become very passionate about it. And so I decided that I wanted to make a video dedicated to my first project and some of the things that I learned and thought about during the process of making it. So I have a notebook here where I've written down my learnings. I've written down my material learnings, which are more like, for example, double check your cable size, and you can add stitches on either side of the raglan markers but not within them. That is a crucial mistake that I made. Or be careful not to knit inside out, things like that. And then I also have a list of meta knowledge and things that I kind of learned philosophically or emotionally or spiritually throughout the process of knitting this sweater. And so I wanted to share a little bit of that with you. And I guess I'll go back to why I started knitting in the first place, which all started a few weeks ago when I went home for the holidays, and something came over me where I remembered that I had a knitting project when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And I just decided, I wonder if that's still around. And I decided to ask my mom if she still had it. And it turns out she did. And it was still on the needles 2 decades later, unfinished scarf, purple and green, crazy color combo. Maybe not something I would have picked today, but my inner 8-year-old was so jazzed about that. Giant needles. I don't know why I had such big size needles, but now that I've learned a little bit, I'm like, those are really big needles. And yeah, found the project just sitting there on the needles for 2 decades. And I picked it up and just immediately started knitting. And it was kind of surreal because I remember picking it up and being like, okay, I don't know if I remember how to do this, but then my hands just started doing it. And I was like, I guess I do remember. And that created this kind of aha moment of the experience of feeling the knowledge still stored in my body, the memory of that knowledge still stored in my hands. And it just sparked something in me. And ever since, I've been kind of fixated on knitting. I went to a yarn store, bought some more yarn, worked on another scarf, and then decided I just wanted to go full send and do the sweater. And that's kind of how I am. I sort of just throw myself in and commit to learning along the way and knowing that there's probably going to be a lot of mistakes, which if you look at this sweater, there's certainly some mistakes. It's not perfect, but it's functional. It wears like a sweater. It's keeping me warm, and I'm very proud of it. So anyways, I started making this sweater. And I would say one of the big takeaways that has been throughout this whole thing is just this idea that I talked about of embodied knowledge. So I think, for me, I work in more of a thought profession, I guess. I work on a computer most of the day. Basically no manual labor, no working with my hands. And I think that knitting obviously represents kind of a return or a desire to return to some sense of making with your hands. And I think that's why we're seeing this large craft renaissance right now. I think we're just at the tip of it, and I'm very excited about it personally. In my own life, I've kind of decided this year I really want to dedicate time to craft with my hands, because even in my creative life, a lot of it involves a screen. I do photography, and a lot of it is editing and processing photos on the screen. I got into making music on my computer, and that also involves a screen. And so it's just this craving for doing things with my hands. And the process of knitting like the way I describe it is like I can't explain what I'm doing, but I'm doing it. And that is this feeling of embodied knowledge where it's like you can't even fully explain it with words in your head, but your hands know what to do. And I think that's true of something like dancing that has been innate to humans for so long that we just like know how to do it. And you may say, I don't know how to dance. Everyone can dance, okay? The point is that there are these forms of knowledge that we have that exist beyond just our mind and exist within our body. And I think that we've deprioritized those forms of knowledge, or we've come to view them as less valuable or less meaningful. And I think that that is, first of all, very sad. And second of all, is already and will continue to contribute to like problems. I think mental health problems. Like, I just don't think it's natural to be so divorced from the knowledge that can live within your body. And I think with the rise of AI, this has only been exacerbated tenfold because there's this attitude around knowledge, especially knowledge that lives in your head, and this almost compulsive need to accumulate it. And Google made that way easier, and people were like, revolutionized by that in the same way like that the camera was revolutionized the art world. And AI is just taking that to the umpteenth degree, the most exaggerated, extreme degree of making everybody feel like the knowledge of the world is at their fingertips. And not only the knowledge, but the ability to like apply it using AI. And it's just, I'm doing this hand motion because it feels like it's all up here. And that feels scary to me, especially at the pace that it's going. So I believe that there is really something to be said for knowledge that you use your body to exercise. And similarly, like even things that you can understand conceptually, applying it in your day-to-day life is another form of embodied knowledge. So that brings me to my next point, which is this idea of patina, this idea of there being wear and tear on something. This sweater, for example, I would say there's already some like wear and tear on it. You can tell that it's not made from Shein or even like a nicer sweater company. Like, it has this handmade quality to it. And that is kind of the sense of patina, which is, when sculptures age, they get this like this greenish cast on them. And I've kind of started thinking of that as a concept in relation to knowledge, and how when there's knowledge that you kind of use bit by bit over time and integrate and then learn more and integrate more, it adds this sort of like worn in quality to the knowledge. Whereas when you are sort of like effortlessly getting knowledge and then like immediately applying it, there's like this uncanny valley effect on the knowledge where it's like you don't really understand what you are taking in, and then you're immediately applying it without having lived in it. And I think that that is a dangerous trend. And so knitting has taught me that like this is something that you just do every day, every day, every day, every day. And you learn a little bit as you go. Over the past 5 weeks, I've learned more and more about the way that different, techniques for getting more tension feel in my hands, the way that certain like ways of holding my needles can make or break something. And it's just, I wouldn't know it unless I was like physically doing it. And so now that I've learned so much just through this 5 weeks, don't get me wrong, it was grueling, and like there were times where I had to start over and it was frustrating as hell, but it makes me excited to think about like what does 5 years of embodied knowledge with knitting look like? What does 10 years look like? So that's been a huge shift for me. Let's see. Oh, okay. Another thing that has been really meaningful to me is this idea of material intimacy, which I think ties into the embodied knowledge. And it's just this idea that because so many of us are doing so much work kind of in the knowledge, in the brain space, there's this like dissociation from the material world that is accelerating at a rapid rate. I've been studying ecology over the last year or so, and a lot of what that field talks about is just the disconnection between humans and nature, and how that is leading to a lot of the societal, mental, emotional, spiritual ills that we're seeing today. And I think that is true when it comes to even just like the objects that are in our life. We, in a similar way to like the the uncanny valley knowledge of AI, there's this kind of uncanny valley relationship to our objects that we have because we have no relationship to like understanding what went into producing them and also how they fit into the larger ecology of life and of nature. For example, with this sweater, it is made of 100% wool yarn that I bought at a local yarn store. I'm able to look up the yarn company and like see the farm where they grow the sheep. So that's very meaningful. But not only that, I physically used my hands to make this sweater, and therefore I developed an intimacy with my hands, and each tiny inch of yarn was touched by my hands, and that is a form of intimacy that makes me feel very connected and attached to the sweater in perhaps a strange way. But if you've ever made something handmade, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. And I just think that this process of knitting the sweater has made me want to look for this in other areas of my life. Like, where are there objects that I have that are taking up space that just, there's no intimacy between me and this object? And can I close that gap when it comes time to like, move or declutter? Can I get really serious about like, what is the relationship that I actually want to have with my stuff? And try to prioritize having more of a sense of intimacy with the objects in my life and the materials in my life. And that also means literally working with my hands to understand the raw materials that go into something. So whether that's yarn and the process of that, or I've started working with clay and I want to work more with pottery and jewelry making and sourcing. And I've been very passionate about, slow fashion for the last few years, and I've talked about it a lot. It's a big part of my life. But this applies to more than just what you wear. This applies to, your furniture and the candles that you burn at night and where you get your food. This idea that like the physical things that are in our life, we have like just a lack of intimacy with those things. We have a lack of connection. And I think that has led to a lot of us as feeling very disconnected, which again makes sense because it's not really normal for things to be so removed from like production and consumption. Like that is not how things have been for most of humans being alive. And so to have this kind of like faceless sort of no smoke and mirrors around the actual process of something being created, yeah, it's convenient, but at what cost? And so that has been making me like, okay, now that I've knit one sweater, like I want to make my whole wardrobe, and I want to not just throw everything out because that can be a form of waste in itself, but mindfully rehoming things and just bit by bit, time over time. It's not going to be an overnight thing. Seeing where I can make swaps and where when I'm purchasing now, I can be more mindful, and where I can invite in opportunities to like maybe make this thing or maybe connect with the people in my town that are making those things and engage in trading and bartering. And I went to a craft swap the other week where everyone brought something that they had made, and it was like a gift exchange. And I was like, this is so amazing. Like I could just feel the energy coming off of each thing that felt truly, intimate, to be able to have something that somebody else made with their hands. And so material intimacy. Where can you invite more material intimacy into your life with the materials and the objects that you engage with on a daily basis? And then I guess I will share one more sort of learning, which it's kind of a few cobbled together, but it's just this idea of mistakes, and mistakes, not viewing mistakes as time wasted. Because there was a few times that I had to start the sweater over where I had spent probably 3 or 4 hours and then realized a crucial mistake. Like the first one was twisting the needle in the round. Can't fix that. You just have to start over. And I remember having a moment of like, I can't believe that I just wasted all of that time. And then I had a moment of, actually, you didn't waste that time. It was just a lesson that took you 4 hours to learn. And that was a very valuable lesson. And I just started my next project, and you're going to believe I paid extra attention to not making that mistake again. And it took me 4 hours to learn, but now I have that lesson for a lifetime. And so this has been a big reframe because there's been a lot of like restarts. And if I were to just get frustrated and be like, this is such a waste of time, like I could just buy this sweater, then it would be over. But I'm starting to view it as like, this time is also worth it. And like I said, it's that embodied knowledge. I wouldn't have learned this just by reading about it. I could have only learned it by doing it, and therefore doing it requires mistakes and imperfections. And that is not a waste of time, which leads to the next thing of just fabric. Like this is fabric here, but it's made of a series of stitches, and not all of the stitches are perfect, especially when something is handmade. As you can see here, not every stitch is perfect, but it's still a sweater. And that made me think about each day in my life as an individual stitch. And not every day is perfect. I'm not going to wake up every day and have the perfect level of focus and productivity and just, girl bossing every day. Like, I struggle a lot with executive dysfunction and, like, the dopamine slot machine that is my phone, and all the things that I'm sure many people struggle with in this modern age. But the point is that a life is made up of a series of days, and not every day is going to be perfect. But when you put them all together, it makes a life, and it can make a very beautiful life, especially when you pour your intention into it and your desire to connect, and to make something meaningful. And that is what I felt that I've done with the sweater, but that is also what I'm trying to do with my life. And I feel like this knowing of just accepting that, like, not every stitch is going to be perfectly perfect and uniform, it doesn't mean that the sweater is bad, has helped me view my own life in a more graceful, empathetic way. And that's been very meaningful. And so, yeah, those are just some of the key learnings. Like I said, this idea of embodied knowledge, this idea of material intimacy, and this idea of embracing imperfection as part of the process and viewing life as just a series of stitches, some of them imperfect, but that patina, that handmade quality is what makes it actually so special. And yeah, if you've gotten this far, thank you for watching. I really have desired a passion for art and craft over the last few years, and this year especially wanting to focus on the craft of it all. I've even been doing some research, hitting up Google Scholar, looking into, like, what is the relationship between fiber arts and activism and all these things, and it's a whole portal. And so I kind of want to share a little bit of my journey just exploring these things, which is why I'm making this video now. And if this interests you, you want to follow along, please subscribe. I plan to share more. And again, this idea is of sharing not always finished products, not answers or prescriptions, but just explorations in craft. And that is craft, like literally, but also this idea of crafting a life that has meaning, and crafting meaning in a time of collapse. Let's be honest. We're in a liminal time right now, and a lot of us feel that we need something to channel our energy into. And I want to explore how craft and creativity, can be a balm to a lot of the fear and anxiety that we're feeling, but also how that it can teach us these meta lessons around how we can relate to one another and to the world around us. And so if that interests you, please subscribe for more, and thank you again for watching.